Hey guys, thanks for joining us for another ThatRule.com podcast. This is another brand new show called All Things Meta, which if you don't know what that means, you probably don't want to listen to the show. Just kidding. This is really just about all things that are weird and strange and how they relate to reality and hyper-reality and everything in between. Discussing anything from fiction to theories about fiction, nonfiction, science, fact, and anything else we can come up with for the most part. It's flexible like that. Typically, this is just going to be myself, Alanah, and Sam. We'll bring in people where appropriate, but you can almost always expect the three of us to be here. For this first one, our own Alanah had a really cool idea, so I'm going to go ahead and let her tell us what we're going to talk about.
Thanks, Jimmy.
You're welcome.
News radio. So, for this first topic, I thought would be interesting to talk about lightsabers. I think that we can first address the place that lightsabers have in the Star Wars universe, and then move on to the place lightsabers could or would potentially have in our universe. What it would look like to have lightsabers be a possibility, assuming that they were accessible in a monetary way, in a financial way. What would that look like? How would that shape our world? What would they be used for? And what would that mean for the human race? But before we even get into that side of it, it might even just be worthwhile talking about what are lightsabers and what do they mean, at least in the Star Wars canon.
Well, I guess you got to start from the beginning, right?
Mm-hmm.
So, the lightsabers evolved a lot since its inception as a fictional item. And when they were first introduced into the Star Wars universe in 1977, it was the way it was described in press and alluded to in the film. It's essentially a laser katana, period.
Yeah.
It's just a little hilt, and you go, and it goes vroom, vroom, very famously. And it can pretty much cut through whatever. They don't really go into the power of the weapon at that point. You just kind of see it, and you're good. Mm-hmm. And as the movies went on, you kind of saw a little bit more of the capabilities. But they didn't explore it too much in what we now refer to as the original trilogy. In the prequel trilogy that came... doesn't take it. In the prequel trilogy, they went a lot further with showing us the capabilities. One of the opening scenes of Phantom Menace, he melts a door, which was awesome. And I remember feeling very betrayed by that scene because the opening was a little slow. Then they got to that, and I was like, oh, okay, good. We have now reached the level that the rest of the movie's going to be, and then it wasn't. So, but that being said, the lightsaber, it is what it is. It's just a finite piece of light/laser/energy that you can use for just about anything that you would need highly focused energy for, typically cutting and heating and that sort of thing. Various expansions of the universe have kind of gone into a couple variations. Like, I've never seen, lightsaber nunchucks or anything like that.
No.
I've never seen anything where they had the lightsaber and they ignited it and it only went out a third of the way for some reason. Like, it had a adjustable length.
Like
I've
dagger.
never seen that. I think it's possible. I'm sure that there may be canon like that, but I've never seen it. But the basic premise and everything that I have seen remains the same. That it's meant to be a weapon that's pure energy of some sort.
I know that there was a video game, a Star Wars video game, where there was like a lightsaber that had a really short blade but a long handle, like looked like a pike or something, or a spear. I think it was The Force Unleashed, but that's the only time that I've heard of a different length lightsaber.
Okay.
And I know that I mentioned before, yeah, like you said, in the original trilogy, there's not really a lot of explanation about where lightsabers come from. It's just they're all kind of there, and they're blue or they're red or they're green or they're purple. Well, if you get into the prequels, it's just like it depends.
And that was just a contractual obligation, is all that was.
I'm black. my lightsaber is purple.
That's pretty much
Um,
what he said.
that's pretty
Wow.
much what it is. Yeah. It's yeah.
I'm sorry, did
Um,
I break your continuity? I have been waiting to do that one for a couple of years. I'm glad I had a place to do it. Hell, my cat just high-fived me.
um,
I'm not even kidding.
good animal. But I know that in not Attack of the Clones, but post the prequels, they had a animated miniseries called just Clone Wars, and I would consider that canon, if only because it was so freaking good. But I guess it's debatable whether or not that's canon, but I would consider it canon. And they had an episode of that where they went in depth into like the process of making a lightsaber
Hmm.
and finding a lightsaber and what it means in like the Jedi training regimen. And like the suggestion was that every lightsaber is unique to the person who wields it, and that part of your work as a Padawan is to go into the secret cave on the specific planet and build your lightsaber. And like you go through trials and you have to defeat things, and then there's the specific gem, like you have to mine a gem, and all these different gems are the colors of the lightsaber. Um, and so there's blue gems and red gems and green gems and blah. And so like it's almost like a magic wand. Like the lightsaber gem chooses you in a way, and it's just a matter of picking the right gem and then building your lightsaber with that gem specifically.
And I
So
Right, and I think with that plot line, because I think I've seen that episode. I did watch a large portion of the Clone Wars, and yes, I enjoyed them, and I consider them mostly canon for sure.
mhm.
At the very least, canon expanding.
Yeah,
Um, it was alluded to in Jedi that building a lightsaber is part of what just generally becoming a Jedi is.
yeah,
Luke kind of stumbled upon that because he had no choice but to construct a lightsaber.
yeah,
And then Vader, the way he says, "I see you've constructed a new lightsaber. Your skills are complete," which
Mhm.
was a very somewhat subtle way of saying, "Well, you're supposed to do that, dumbass." And and that kind of, I think, from the expanded universe and even talking about Clone Wars as canon, you take all these little things and you make them the basis for larger pieces of canon later, which is certainly the case there. So I don't think that anyone could argue, regardless of whether or not they feel Clone Wars is canon, that constructing a lightsaber is part of it, and
yeah.
and certainly, uh, the jewel thing. Like one would, if you have even a passable knowledge of basic science, you probably know something about prisms, and jewels are a form of
Exactly.
prism, and so before anyone comments anything about, well, it's not canon, therefore your entire conversation is moot, fuck off. That's not true, because the basic physical premise of the lightsaber, that makes sense. We're
Yeah.
not really here necessarily to discuss the canon. I always have a problem with this word, canonical. I like canonical because it sounds like maniacal.
Canonical.
Canonical sounds evil. It's probably what
as
you
it,
like.
as it should,
Yes,
because
it
if it
does.
sticks to a story, that's fiction. And if it sticks to fiction, fiction is evil. No, I'm not kidding. Who am I
Whoa.
kidding? But we're not really here to debate that nearly as much as we are the lightsaber
Yeah.
itself. So I just want to kind of throw that out there so that anyone listening, oh, Clone Wars. I don't care about that argument right now. At least not for this episode.
Do we want
So
to get to like the logistics of lightsaber in science? Like, do we want to touch that? Like, let's be real, it doesn't make much sense.
mm-mm.
No.
Not unless they have a ridiculously powerful generator inside that little hilt, and that the battery is equally ridiculous, and these jewels have to be cut in a very specific way to produce that. There has to be all sorts of energy limiters, and which would
Yeah.
that would tell me there'd have to be a
How do you-
microprocessor of some sort inside that limits the energy output and keeps things running at a certain current level, and everything is it's pretty ridiculous when you think about it.
Yeah.
There's just no way.
Not really. Not with the
No.
technology that we know. However,
Granted, you have to think too that they have, like photon guns,
Right.
which are pretty much like the same thing. It's just a limited energy beam.
Right.
So those can't really exist either.
Well, but
But
a real world comparison, in effect, would be because if you think about it, what it probably, and this is a really really simplistic way of looking at it, um, is the same thing that's in a blaster, except it's a
mhm,
constant. It's a cycled beam, meaning it's going inside and out of the lightsaber. Probably solving
mhm,
the power source problem, where it's probably powering itself to like an alternator. Probably that would be my guess, and that there's a very faint force field inside of it that simply just makes sure that it stays within the bounds of that blade. That'd be my guess
yeah,
of how it works. So all it has to do, like a lighter, is that if you think of energy as a lighter fluid and as a Zippo, you flint, you spark it, and that's all the battery has to do is light it, and then the beam kind of powers itself like that. If you think of it in those terms, I can see it making some sense. Um, but wow, I never really had to think about it that hard.
Um, I've heard a theory that is somewhat, I guess, inferred. If you look at the way in which a lightsaber is powered,
Hmm.
um, just by observation, I've heard the like suggestion that only force wielders can use lightsabers. That if you're not a force sensitive being, you can't
right.
you can't wield a lightsaber because it's not actually powered by technology, but it's powered by the force. So like the gem is there, and you use the force and push it as a Jedi through the gem, and you control how far it goes out. And like once you created the blade of your lightsaber, essentially, like it, you're wielding the force, and so you control how it pops out and goes back in as a Jedi. And so like the suggestion would be that it's not actually so much technology as it is the power of the force.
Which, if we're willing to exclude extended universe for the duration of this conversation,
Mm-hmm.
I would wave the bullshit flag on that theory because Han Solo wielded it in Empire Strikes Back, who is
You're right.
arguably not really a force sensitive guy. In fact,
Yeah.
even though he's sympathetic to those that believe in it, up to that point in canon, he's not a believer at all.
Yeah.
And he wasn't wielding it with any degree of concentration beyond "let's get this tauntaun sliced open, yo."
Yeah.
And I'm certain he said "yo" in an outtake.
I'm pretty
Oh,
positive he said
Yeah.
yo.
So I don't. So I think that if we just take that single instance, and I made sure to qualify it with denying the whole EU thing because
Yeah.
his kids go on to be Jedi in the EU, which I love those stories, but we can't base pseudoscientific theory on something that may not actually have happened.
yep.
so so
And
I go off of
also to go back to the blasters again, like if you're gonna assume that only force wielders can use a lightsaber, if it requires the same general kind of thing to create like a photon beam,
Mhm.
then you'd have to also be a force wielder to use a gun in that universe, which is definitely not the case.
So can we agree that for the duration of this conversation that the force wielders only theory is moot?
Defunct.
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Because I think
I
that's
think so.
far too complex and way too subjective to have something that should be somewhat cultural, but mostly, hard scientific pseudo fact theory.
Yeah.
I do like the theory,
Me too.
but no, I think it's
But it has blatant
justifiably
holes.
debunked.
Yeah.
Yeah, I don't think it holds a lot of water, or in this case, energy. Um, but it is
Pure.
a romantic thought, and
Midichlorians.
yeah, that's a whole other podcast because I got a whole lot to say about that shit.
A whole other
Um,
pod
a
So
lot.
do me and Alanah.
Right, right. Uh, so
coming soon.
right. So
Coming
for the
soon.
duration of this and we're defining it for ourselves as much as the listener that we're going to focus
Yeah.
on what we feel would be the most factual and physical based aspects of the lightsaber. The spiritual, we're going to try to steer away from, especially when we get to the what if they were on Earth thing, because we have no way of measuring whether or not someone would be able to do that. So, I mean, they're arguably a spiritual symbol, certainly from their cultural.
The rite of passage.
Exactly, certainly. And building one, whether or not you believe in that theory, which I really should just shove it to the side because we just said we're not going to do that. Just the act of building something that you're going to use in that kind of a society and a subculture, like that's hugely symbolic and really important. So, just to draw parallels right off the bat, if we did have them here on Earth, even if they started out the way that like Bushido blades and katanas came into existence, where they were made and it was the same kind of thing, where that was you had to make it yourself or have it made and it be gifted to you or you earned it. Let's face facts. In our society, it would eventually get to a point where you could buy one.
Yeah.
So you don't see that in the Star Wars universe, and that's arguably because of a few things. One being regulation, the other one being that at that point, it was still very much accepted.
Generation of samurai.
Right. Those generations, that was just what they did at that point. So one could arguably compare it to like feudal France and so forth, or not France, Japan. France, Sacre Bleu, yeah, French ninjas. That's another one. No such thing. Just gonna throw that out there. Although, if there is a Frenchman out there that's a ninja, legitimately, please, I want to meet you because that would be hilarious. But
yes.
So you have to look at the cultural part of building it and everything else. Is there anything we're missing as far as establishing what it means in their world?
I think that the only other thing that intrigues me about it is the fact that the lightsaber is seen as this higher form of weapon in Star Wars. Like I know that Obi-Wan says something. This is not just a blaster; it's something more elegant. So I mean, for a more civilized age, I believe is what he says. And so I mean, I think that it's interesting to me that yes, they have blasters in place of guns, and then they have lightsabers in place of swords. And typically in our culture, we would say you don't bring a knife to a gunfight. Like,
right.
The gun is what's going to make this for you. But in the Star Wars verse, that estimation is reversed. The saber is the higher form of weapon when compared to a blaster.
Right, and also equally as potent as a defensive weapon as it is an offensive weapon, which in terms of conventional weaponry that we have here on this planet at this point in history isn't usually the case at all. I can't really think of any examples of an equally defensive and offensive weapon that is as simple as that.
Well, although I think that is the case when you could make the argument that it's only an effective defensive weapon in the hands of a Force user.
Mm-hmm.
That a person
that's absolutely right. Yeah.
Yeah, that you need to know how to use it well.
That helps. Yeah. Yeah. So arguably, if let's just bring think geek into this for a moment. If they were in our world and they were like the chopsticks that you could get, someone goes to throw a punch at you, not so sure that the casual sushi eater is going to be able to use those chopsticks as a Jedi would to defend oneself. They're going to use them as an offensive weapon, and clumsily at that, because you're eating sushi, last thing you're thinking of is getting, punched.
Right. I don't know what kind of sushi you go to.
Where I go, it's fists flying every which way.
Oh, man. I mean, also, in the Star Wars universe, there's not much in the way of long-range weaponry like there is here. If anything, Star Wars is almost the beginning of them discovering long-range weaponry. Like, oh, we built a Death Star, we're going to blow up a planet. It's just like, I think that's one of the reasons that the lightsaber is so effective as both offensive and defensive.
I would also argue, though, that I don't think it's nearly about the concept of a long-range weapon so much as the scale. Because you've already got Star Destroyers.
Yeah.
And that are very long-range weapons and could easily bombard a planet in a mass-destructive kind of way. Mm-hmm. But to flat out just snuff a planet, yeah, Death Star is kind of as far as you can go in that universe. Uh, but the majority of all skirmishes and conflicts in that universe occur pretty much in your face, for the most part. Um, and whether that's culturally intentional within, from their perspective, like we're not into doing things from afar. We want you to see the face of your attacker, or it's technologically limiting. I don't know. But based on the evidence in those films, even if you take the Death Star out of the equation, it seems to me that it's generally accepted that they just want to do things in a somewhat more honorable way and be like, hey, we're here. We're stormtroopers. We're not going away. Get in the grave. Because they have the capability of doing that. And they don't. Because, look at like the assault on Kashyyyk, for example, in episode 3. They had the equivalent of Star Destroyers, because I know they didn't develop and build them in the 18 seconds from the end of the film to the epilogue at the end. They had them, and they had those ships at the very beginning that were effectively Star Destroyers. And you even see in the opening of A New Hope how much power comes from those things and the super Star Destroyers and so forth. So the capability is there to bombard, a continent with weapons and so forth, and even an aerial attack or so forth. Yet the assault on Kashyyyk happens basically on one coast, completely like Normandy kind of thing, which is more dramatic, but
it's just as much an assault on their morale as it is, an attempt to actually gain control. It's,
sure.
We're not just going to do the greatest show of technological power just for the heck of doing it. We're going to do it so we can beat you into the ground and make you cry.
Yeah, and which is a very imperial thing to do.
Yeah.
So culturally, I think that, technologically they've got the capability. Culturally, that's not their bag, baby.
Yeah.
So lightsaber, close quarters, honorable, effective in more ways than one, but to really get the most use out of your lightsaber, make sure you're a Force user, kind of thing. I wonder if they have to like print their own owner's manual. Congratulations on building your own new lightsaber. There are a few things you should know. Little UL symbol at the bottom. That'd be hilarious. That'd be on our planet though, in our universe, I guess. So that's where weaponry and technology and the culture is there.
Yeah.
Just, if you drop the lightsaber into Earth today, what happens?
Well, I think the first thing I would want to know is who would use it.
Mm-hmm.
Like, if it had just been around for a while, like, so going forward in time a little bit, like, who would be the primary people that would actually use it?
Well,
would it be like our samurai, like modern day
something
ninjas,
we probably should address before we go any further is if the lightsabers exist on Earth now, did we all grow up with the Star Wars universe? Are we aware of Star Wars and now we just happen to have lightsabers? Are we talking about something where someone discovered how to make one and they're like, ooh, Star Wars, it's just like Star Wars? Or is this something where we're ignoring that fiction exists in our culture?
That's an interesting question. I think that it might be interesting to go at it from both directions. So first, look at it as if Star Wars, the fiction, never existed, and 5 years ago somebody invented the lightsaber. Which, if that were to happen in our current world, someone invents the lightsaber. It's going to be this really interesting thing, really well publicized, but it's not going to be accessible to the public. It's going to be developed for militaristic use only initially, and then maybe it'll be like, oh, we've realized we can use lightsaber technology to rapidly to limit our manufacturing processes for automobiles and for building materials because we can cut faster and more cleanly. Oh, we can do this. I know, Jimmy, you were interested in ideas like, oh, this is a more humane way to kill animals in meat production.
Right.
Less mess.
Instant cauterization and stuff like that, yeah. Medical stuff too. You'd have like the light scalpel and so on and so forth.
Exactly. So I
Uh,
think
so yeah, I think that
yes.
definitely speaks to Sam's initial question, like who would use it. Given our culture, regardless of what pop culture we have, this kind of technology is always going to start at the military industrial complex level and then slowly filter down as it becomes more applicable to other realms. So I think we can probably agree it would start with the military. Um, and because it being such a close quarters weapon, although the military would develop it, they would probably abandon it pretty quick at this stage of our history because it's just not practical. I was in the Marine Corps, and I know, past warfare theory. I know modern warfare theory pretty well, and I can tell you that outside of having it, available as a melee weapon, it wouldn't be something they would focus on. They wouldn't stop using the M16A2 and go to lightsabers. It would be practical. They would probably try to take that technology and then adapt it into a blaster, which they would use. Then you'd have the lightsaber as the backup, like a bayonet. That's probably where they would go with it. They would use, if someone came up with the lightsaber first, then they would try to adapt that technology to something more practical in the military realm, and then that technology would then filter down into other things like medicine and industry.
Yeah. So given like a decade is like maybe enough time for it to filter down to at least the medical level.
Mm-hmm.
Um, I would have to assume that lightsabers would not be accessible to the general public,
Right.
not even as a defensive weapon. I don't foresee cops owning any until. I mean, I don't know. I mean, like, what do you think about that? Like, because I mean, if the cops get lightsabers, then there's no way that we're going to be able to avoid black market sales of lightsabers.
Well,
You know,
to be fair though, there are a lot of weapons that police officers have never had that black market sales are extremely high on.
exactly.
So it's kind of like anything else in today's society. Once someone gets a hold of one and they can figure out how to manufacture it, you're going to have replicas, not only replicas, but actual copies all over the place.
Yeah.
Like what I can see happening almost immediately, like as soon as the technology gets released for private sector, like medical and so forth,
Yeah.
someone's going to come up with a way of creating one that creates a beam of light that is non-harmful, and then someone's going to find a way to convert those replicas into, weaponize them, and that's where the market would probably go reasonably fast. We're talking within 2 years of like medical personnel getting this technology for scalpels and stuff.
Yeah.
And then because today you'd have everything from lightsaber K-bars to machetes and the full-blown lightsaber. You'd have
Oh, I
you
want
know,
a light machete.
I want a lightsaber bread knife
That's
because
what I was gonna say.
right, because you can cut a loaf of Italian bread and it's instantly toasted. Hello.
Yes.
And then you'd have to
Yeah.
develop like cold light technology where it cuts it without burning it.
Yeah.
You
Mhm.
know. And
Oh wow, cold light technology. That's a crazy concept. Dang. That'd be cool.
I'm good at that sort of thing. Uh, and then of course you'd have to have like once you get it to that level where the technology is being adapted for multiple uses, then you have to come up with something that's going to protect you from it. Something like some kind of special, whether it's chainmail or a certain kind of meshed mirror cut Kevlar, like a reflective Kevlar that is designed like it's specifically attuned like a tuning fork because there's a frequency level of this light and to tune to that frequency to deflect it enough for you to realize, oh shit, there's a lightsaber next to my hand. But it's not really practical that you can't cut through it. Although that would be one of the things that the military would be really keen on developing. Is like, we don't want people cutting their arms off when they're training. So they'd try. So I would think and / hope that this energy beam does operate on somewhat of a specific frequency, or at least each individual one has a specific frequency. so that you could dial in reflective or sonic shielding to at least repel, if not completely deflect, the blades.
Hmm.
Bet you didn't think I thought that deep into this stuff, did you?
Well, no, no, I'm not surprised by that. It's just I'm thinking because I know that I had heard or read somewhere that the premise, like one of the main premises of the lightsaber is that it can cut through anything.
Mm-hmm.
And so if that is the case, I know that we've established, the pseudoscience of it, but I'm not sure whether what it means to have the idea of defending against it. Part of what makes the lightsaber so effective is that you can't.
Correct. But if we look at the most basic concept of how this would probably work in our world,
Mm-hmm.
if you know anything about energy, light, and harnessing it, it
Yeah.
revolves around frequency, speed of molecules, and so on. So if you find something that can reflect the light, can somehow impede the travel of the molecules at their speed. So like something like if you looked microscopically at this fabric, this theoretical fabric, maybe it's
I
something
know
like a
you would.
speed bump. You know what I mean? Like I absolutely refuse to believe that if the lightsaber technology were feasible in our world, that there would be no way to even slow it down. I think that's absolute horseshit.
Yeah, I
So
think
what
that.
what I'm thinking of right now is that, you have two lightsabers, a green one and a red one, and when you fight and they collide, they stop each other, right?
Mm-hmm.
So I just have this image in my head of all buildings being surrounded by a force field of lightsabers, essentially, like bars made of those light beams.
Light tech.
So
Yeah.
that even if someone's trying to get into your building with a lightsaber, they can't.
And yet, if that malfunctions and that field
Yeah.
accidentally gets bigger, you try to walk through a revolving door and you're suddenly nothing.
Yep.
Yeah.
Great.
I think for me, it's just having.
You know what happened to Phil? Yeah, he walked into a door. Poor bastard.
Ugh.
Oh
That's
my
a bad
gosh.
day.
That's why I only shop in Chinatown, man. They don't have that shit.
But no, I think you're right. I think that to allow for it to be possible in our reality, I think that you have to let go of the mysticism that comes along with the lightsaber, and I think that's what I was considering. Like
Oh, sure.
like this almost magical quality with the lightsaber that exists in the Star Wars universe. It's like that has to be completely neglected in order for it to exist in our reality. And I think that's a really great example of where it could go in our reality, Sam. When you say a building surrounded by light tech, like that makes complete sense to me. Complete
Absolutely.
sense.
And I mean, you could even theorize why the mysticism fails to exist here.
Mhm.
Our technology, up until the last 20 years, there's nothing even close. Lasers, are close, but not by a long shot, right?
Mhm.
So, accepting that as far as our world is concerned with the technology being what it is, it gets dropped in this culture, not feudal Japan, or feudal France for that matter.
Yeah.
Not that there ever was such a thing, Sacre Bleu. But, so just by virtue of the culture it's dropped into, I think that that's quite literally impossible. Although, just like with any other piece of technology, there are going to be pockets of the world where it does seem magical.
Yeah.
For however limited time only, while supplies last. So, but those have really the exact same cultural impact as any of the other technologies that are weird and strange to those cultures. So, I don't think it's necessarily a road we have to go down in detail, but I think that the mysticism, we're not just discounting it. I just think it really doesn't have a chance in hell of making it as a mystical object in today's day and age anyway.
No.
Much to my chagrin,
Yeah.
but
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I agree. Yeah.
So, so I guess we've already kind of started that. Like, what other fields would, it's privatized now, and so some cops have their lightsaber nightsticks, and you've got the black market for the weapons, and blasters are being developed at that point, and they're very military. We've got the cold, light red knives and so forth. We've got the force fields to kind of keep away the lightsabers. You know, let's try to think even further outside the box. What else could we do with it?
I can think of a trillion uses for it in the theater. Just backstage, every time I need to, gosh, I need a really fine cut in this thing, and I don't want to use scissors because it's going to be jagged. I need something that's going to be quick, and we'll fix this without causing a mess. I'll lightsaber it. You know, like, I think of a million times when we need a burned effect on some set piece, and I don't want to have to go to find soldering materials. I don't want to sit here and potentially cause a fire by using matches that will take hours to do. Lightsaber. It's going to solve that problem for me.
Dremel would rebrand into Dremel Light.
Yep.
So Dremel, and they would just have attachments that change the shape of what the light is. Oh, yeah.
Fantastic.
Which again, we're talking about, prisms again, and because if we have the technology to make it just a stick, we can pretty much do whatever we want once we figure that out. That's geometry at that point.
Anyone in design would love to have it just to create.
Oh yeah.
Burn anything. It'd be great.
Yeah, can you imagine how much faster I'd make game cases? Give me a break. And then you could do the automated thing too. Like instead of a bandsaw or a water saw, you have the light saw now. Hot and cold light, of course. And an industry would just be revolutionized to a level that.
Absolutely.
I mean, quite literally, traditional blades, obsolete.
Retro.
Yeah, because depending upon how we made it. Now, and that's something maybe we should kind of backtrack and talk about. I don't think that in today's day and age, with the world being what it is, and what we know about lasers and refraction and magnification, I honestly don't think that joules would power this thing. I really don't think that would be part of the equation. I think that it would probably have something to do with magnifying and refraction lenses, maybe some sort of prism, but nothing that's ridiculously expensive or a subjective cut like a diamond. You can't mass produce those reliably enough to do what that thing probably has to do. And it would also probably rely on that cycle of energy, like the alternator theory of it powering itself for it to be practical. At least from my perspective. If you guys can think of a better way to make the damn thing, tell me now, because I want to hear it.
Yeah, no.
All right, well, good. Here's something like the gas stove, like the range. Instead of gas heat, you've got light heat. Because it powers itself.
Yeah.
As
long as you have resistant pans, resistant cookware to the light tech, you should be fine.
Right, and because you're able to, in theory, control like a certain frequency, which would control the heat versus the cold, you'd have it would be capable of both cold and hot light, and they would have to have
not just warm things up, but cool them down.
Right. And then you could probably even have it. You could even do it like a microwave where it's programmed to how far hot you want it to get it, and then once you verify that the inside of the pan is at a certain temperature, then you gradually cool it down so nothing burns. Oh, the applications.
Wow.
Yeah, and because of the nature of the energy, there's a good chance that we'd be able to harness this stuff to augment solar energy and so on and yeah, let's get on this. Let's make these things because wars would be more fun to watch on CNN, and I'd be able to cut my bread with a and not pay an electric bill. It'd be kind of awesome.
I think light tech in general, just beyond the saber itself, light tech is one of the things that would completely revolutionize our world. It's like the equivalent of an arc reactor in the Marvelverse. It's just like, well, there went everything else. This is going to change everything.
Which hopefully the creation of it would not generate a bellowing Jeff Bridges anywhere ever.
Well, nothing
because that was embarrassing. Tony!
Whoa!
You don't sound like that, Jeff Bridges.
No one wants that.
No.
No one.
Like,
Jeff
I
Bridges.
bought his performance up until that point. Tony! You went yelling, screaming, raging Yoda on me. Nope. No. Nope.
See, but I'd take bellowing Jeff Bridges over awkward
Over what?
technical Rourke any day.
I
It's awkward. Yeah.
kind of like Mickey Rourke. I didn't think he
I
could
like
pull it
Mickey
off,
Rourke.
but I think he did.
In that role.
Where is Bird?
Bird.
Oh man, this is the Bird. This is not Bird. Yeah.
Okay, so let's get personal. What color is your lightsaber?
Ooh. I would have to go with a nice deep blood red, not dissimilar from the stool I sit on in the Jimmy TR reviews or even the background of the That Ruled site. In case someone can't tell, that's kind of one of my favorite colors. Like that and a really deep emerald green, which I like. But I would not choose that color for the simple fact that it's been done. The green one, it's been done. But the darker red, because let's face it, Vader's red, it's kind of pink. Okay? Now, I want it to where the center is the same red as the outer red of the Vader Sith lightsaber. So like my brightest point is a true red, and then the outside outside is a bit darker, so you almost can't see me coming.
You know,
And all my cookware would be that way too.
oh, of course, naturally. Oh my gosh, and you can personalize all your light tech to match. Oh man, whew. But
But if they did paisley lightsabers, I'd be all on paisley and or like a plaid lightsaber. Oh fuck!
No way, I'm
Polka
not
dots?
a lightsaber.
Can I get polka dots?
Oh my god,
I was gonna say polka dots, but I thought you might dig the polka dots for some reason.
Dots.
And then some asshole would have a Randy Rhodes lightsaber, you know?
Oh gosh.
Da-da-da-da.
You know, I'd like my lightsaber to be a nice, rich gold, like a golden rod.
Right on. C-3PO model. Nope. The C-3PO model. Oh, dear. No. That'd be cool.
I
What about
think
you,
I'd
Sam?
want a blue one.
A blue
I
one?
think I'd want. Yeah, I think I'd want a blue one.
No, I think you want one you could change color at
Really
will.
blue lightsaber. That'd be awesome.
You'd probably
That-
match it to your hair every
Oh my
time.
gosh, that would be amazing.
Yeah.
So amazing.
I don't see why you
I would
couldn't do
do
that. You know, I
Yeah,
think
Yeah,
don't-
I
It's a matter of
USB port on the lightsaber. You got software on your computer.
Yeah.
Windows only. Mac users, fuck off. No offense. I'm kidding.
no.
But in all seriousness,
Apple
I can totally.
Apple buy light tech, and then they'll all be called eye sabers.
oh my gosh,
God.
highlights.
And then Microsoft comes out with one, but in order not to violate copyright, like the lightsaber has to be a little crooked at the top or something, some stupid fucking thing, you know. And would they like project their brand name into the blade and shit, you know?
Oh
Like,
god.
because I could see that. I could totally see that happening. Like pop-up ads on your lightsaber.
Oh, I
know?
completely see that happening.
You'd have to buy the premium lightsaber software to fucking to get be ad-free in your lightsaber use.
Customization of a lightsaber tech. Oh,
But with
man.
everything else you can do, I mean, I can totally see that. You plug it into a computer and you program the light, and then even have it on random. So every time you turn it on, it's a different color. So you think, ooh, and some jackass sitting on his couch, bzz, boom, bzz, ooh, boom, bzz, wow, zoom. You know, just sit there and just fuck with it for days. And then of course, you've got to have, the light tech lighter. Fucking light the hookahs with it and shit.
Ugh.
Oh yeah. And then have a hookah with like the light tech in it, so it constantly keeps it at the optimum temperature for burning.
Oh man, constantly keeps it smoldering. That would be fantastic.
Yeah, fireplace technology. Oh, why are we talking about this? Let's go do it.
You go ahead. We'll be right behind you.
That'll
right behind you.
I can't even finish my scripts on time.
After I find a couple dozen engineers to come help us.
Well, it happens. Stranger things have happened, but yeah.
Makes sense.
So we've talked about industry, and let's face it, a lot of what we're talking about, although somewhat innovative, has probably at one point been discussed by dozens upon scores of dozens of potheads everywhere. Let's try to get really funky and try to think of something totally out of the box application for the technology. I got it. Christmas lights. No?
I feel like that would be a really eccentric and excessive use for them, because at that point, that's like saying, I'm gonna capture a ton of fireflies and 10 to each bulb and then put them up as my Christmas lights. Like, no one does that. It's when you can get regular Christmas lights, I feel like using them as Christmas lights, maybe, some jerk with $1 trillion to spend would do it, but like in general, I feel like it's not a practical use for them. It's not actually use.
It's an exploitation, that's for sure. And if you think about it, it's wireless and renewable, so you'd never have to buy them again. You know what I mean? So if the tech got to that level of adaptability, someone would do that. They would replace LED lights and everything else too.
I suppose.
On every level.
How lightsaber really can get,
Oh yeah. So we go to the far commercialization of it, but as far as practical use, well, here's one that kind of I hadn't even considered. Considering that we've talked about having like the barrier technology for the sabers themselves, why couldn't we adapt the technology into something that wouldn't shear something in half but would repel it without force of impact? You know what I mean? So like guardrails and things like that. Speed bumps, things of that nature. Because you've got the cold light, right? So now it's something, you could even coat the roads with it to a certain degree, eliminating potholes and things of that nature.
Yeah, it would require, redoing everything. But
which they do all year, every year anyway.
It seems like a logical progression.
Yeah. In true meta tradition, Alanah has been called away from the podcast to tend to something else. She didn't specify what it was, so for all I know, she's being consulted on the industrialization of light tech right now. I don't know.
It's totally it.
Sure, we'll go with that. But we were discussing the whole speed bump guardrail, just basically, I suppose, expanding upon the original idea of the tech, all the things you'd have to come up with to make them practical in our world, because we wouldn't just weaponize it. So we're kind of talking about force fields, which if you already have the cutting technology, it wouldn't take that much R&D to kind of reverse it to become something of a repellent to keep people safe and so on, which then we're going into force fields, I think.
I feel like when you get to the point where you're putting it in almost every road as, a force field for cars or whatever, then would you assume that a lightsaber would not be able to then cut through a road? I guess it depends on how you make it.
Right, and I think that, if we have to, let's say that the automotive technology remains what it is as far as the tires are rubber and so forth, I think the concern would be making it a mild enough field that it wouldn't damage rubber and it wouldn't damage the car if it hit the guardrail, which would be two different frequencies, I'd surmise, and also be safe to the human touch. Now, that being the case, I think that it would be perfectly logical and reasonable to assume that because they're lower level frequencies and lower level intensity, that your standard lightsaber would probably be able to cut through it with relative ease.
Yeah.
You know, so if you outfit the entire outside of your car with lightsabers and spikes and post-apocalyptic Mad Max shit, you know, you'd probably still be able to cause some damage.
Yeah.
So, I mean, if we're talking about, you know, again, level of degree, yeah, I totally think you could cut through it with a lightsaber at that point. They'd probably do everything they could to discourage it and, you know, deter it physically from happening. But I don't think that there'd be any way to truly prevent it, because you could take the technology into, if you're able to control the focus of energy and the energy output and so forth, I think that the technology would go in the other direction, making it even more powerful, because someone would want to be able to cut that stuff with the force field on, even for industrial purposes like fixing a guardrail or something like that. So I think it's perfectly reasonable that would that you'd still be able to cut through, even with, you know, your standard grade lightsaber, I think.
What about clothing? You could create like light tech armor.
Yeah, absolutely.
That'd be awesome.
Oh yeah, absolutely, it would be.
I just see the entire world turning into Tron.
I absolutely, yeah.
The image I have in my head.
Yeah, and I think that because we're talking about something that conceivably you could completely manage and control from a home computer and a wall socket, it being something that accessible at that point, that it would be less than 20 years that, you know, conventional weaponry, as far as your you know, combustive firearms and so forth, they'd be obsolete because it'd be useless.
Yeah.
Completely useless. People would still keep them around because there'd be some dumbass that, you know, wore his wife beater out to get the paper. Oh, I hate that fucker. You know. But then you want to, if we're talking about then, as with any technology and weaponry, it becomes perverted. So now you imagine CSI Miami in 30 years. You know, what are the path, you know, the pathology and the you know, what's the science behind? Well, how do you figure out, you know, what kind of traces would this kind of stuff leave behind in terms of the frequency of the lightsaber? Could you trace it back to its manufacturer? And would there be databases? And there'd certainly be a registry if you had the weaponized stuff and so on.
Be pretty crazy.
Yeah, but I think it'd be possible.
As long as I get to have a light cycle, I don't care.
Oh, so now you want the Tron light cycle now?
Oh, yes.
So this whole podcast is really just an excuse for you to say you want to be in Tron.
Basically.
You've used me yet again.
Hey, it was Alanah's idea.
Yeah, but yeah, sure. But as soon as you heard the idea, you're like, all right, I'm totally going to wait till Alanah leaves and then corner Jimmy and be like, I want to be in Tron.
Tron.
It's like I said in the Halo 4 Plays episode, or that Role Plays Halo 4 episode. Do you think Jeff Bridges ends a lot of his conversations like that? Fuck you, I was in Tron.
No.
You know, I would hope that he would, you know, and then follows it up with, "Oh man, I'm just messing with you, bummer," you know, or something.
Jeff Bridges.
Yeah, totally. Did you just say Jeff Bridges?
Jeff Bridges.
Jeff Bridges. Da da da. That's, you know, that could be a whole show, and that would be the whole theme. Jeff Bridges. Da da da. And then it'd just be Jeff Bridges. It'd just be a live cast of him being Jeff Bridges. You know, and you could arguably have a Chuck Norris show. It's the same thing.
Yeah.
Because, you know, these unbelievably elevated people, you know, and of course those would be the first guys to get the light tech.
Christopher Walken.
Yes.
Yeah.
You know, like Chuck. Think about this: Chuck Norris light tech beard. Like his beard was replaced by light tech. You know, so it's even more powerful. You know.
Oh, God.
And the next incarnation of the Dude, because they are making a Big Lebowski sequel. Uh-huh. In our reality that we're constructing right now, the Dude's robe would be light tech, because he wouldn't want to get pissed on, you know.
Light tech hair extensions?
Sure, we could do that. And and to complete the trifecta, Christopher Walken's, the gap in his teeth would be bridged by light tech. You know.
Oh my God.
Well, because the obvious one is that slicked hair of his, and that's too obvious, you know. So I had to go with the tooth gap there. Can you imagine like corporate sponsorship for light tech? Like when it first comes out, like what celebrities would latch onto this and be like, "Hey, buy your light tech cutlery and shit." Like who, Martha Stewart. It's a good thing. Light tech. It's a good thing. I don't know.
No.
Or do you go straight for the crazy shit and have Jackie Chan hawking it at 4 in the morning on infomercials? I don't know. Do you understand the light tech that is coming out of my mouth?
Nope.
Man, no one understands the light tech coming out your mouth.
Nope.
No, I guess not. I guess not. So yeah, I think that we've established that, like anything else, it would come in under military, auspicions and would very quickly be turned into completely over-capitalized nonsense. But it would be awesome.
Yes. It would be awesome.
Yes, absolutely.
And could potentially change the way the entire world looks.
And works.
Yep.
Because again, if we base everything off of my initial theory of it being a renewable energy source, because that's the only way it makes any sense to me, that everything you use it for is renewable, and therefore, essentially, you never need to buy batteries and shit.
Right.
So, it would fuck the economy pretty hard unless a lot of these companies put money into development, like Energizer and Duracell and the electric companies and so forth. They'd all have to adapt everything they do with the light tech.
Lightsaber.
Fuck. Man.
I'm telling you, it's gonna happen.
The old saying that so-and-so is rolling in their grave.
Yep.
Well, Steve Jobs is like dancing in his grave right now.
Yeah.
Yes, the Lightsaber! I should have done that!
Brilliant idea.
And of course, you get an iPhone that doubles as a saber. So your iPhone just, instead of the app, it now actually has a blade come out of it.
You see, that's why they've been making the iPhones progressively longer and longer. They're developing it into the iSaber hilt.
See,
One day.
Yeah, see, and here I thought it was just a really complex dildo they were going for, but no, clearly lightsaber.
Clearly.
Yes, absolutely. Although, given the shape of the iPhone, if you're using it as a sexual aid, I weep for your sex life.
Yeah.
Just saying. Or any phone for that matter.
Yeah.
Lightsaber phone. Speaking of things that are that shape, lightsaber phone. A wired, tethered to the wall, like wireless phone kind of thing would be a good idea, because then you'd have like dual purpose, right? Because you keep a phone next to the bed, you have a button that you uncover the button, for a safety, then you got a lightsaber to fend off attackers. Space saving on top of everything else. And with the light tech clothing, right, if it's generated, right, to be opaque or whatever the case may be, I suppose one way you could do it is you just have the, like a belt, and then you have a collar, right? And then you just kind of press a couple preset buttons, and then it covers your body in the configuration you wanted, whether it was long sleeve, short sleeve, what have you, whatever color. So you'd only have a few things hanging in your closet, I guess. Although your clothes would hum, it'd be worse than corduroy. Instead of it would be vroom, 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 vroom.
Every time you move.
Yep. It would be great for the first 15 minutes.
Yeah.
And anyone who spoke with their hands would be fucked, because you couldn't hear them talk over. Try to tell us. And then he said. Yeah. And then anyone who was a little touched, so to speak, run around town just to hear their clothes move. It could get pretty ugly out there.
It's ridiculous.
Like, what would happen? Like kids on the playground making fun of each other. Like, oh, he can't make his clothes hum the way ours hum. He's stupid. He's an outcast because he doesn't hum the way we hum. He can't afford the higher pitched hum. He's got the low hum. He's on welfare. Like what would? Because it would be used for status, like anything else, you know.
Yeah, yeah.
Or like what would happen if like you were, you know, like the low income ones, they just short out after so long. So you're at school and suddenly your clothes short out and you're naked,
Oh God.
and that becomes the new bad dream, you know. I dreamt I was at school, my light clothes shorted out, and I was suddenly nude. You know.
It'd be horrible.
Oh yeah. And you know, since I kind of brought it up, you know, what about light tech sex age? Adjustable length and girth and everything else? Sure.
The idea of that kind of terrifies me.
It probably, on one hand, terrifies you from the standpoint of, you know, that's going in me. But if the tech got to that point where it could be done, you'd buy the expensive one because you don't want it to malfunction and cut you in half.
Well,
Obviously.
yeah.
Right. But there are plenty of people out there that once it was established that it was safe, they would flock.
I'm sure.
Oh yeah, I can't. I'm not so sure I'd want to have a fleshlight that was like that. Fleshlight saber, you know. But, you know, although I'm sure you'd get the ultimate Hummer from it. You know, no. To any of you listening right now that are like, ew, he's a pervert. There's someone else listening that thought of that before I even came up with it. And even if I didn't, someone would come up with it and do it. You know, every type of technology out there gets adapted for something. I actually heard of there's software/hardware out there. Of course, in Japan, it was where it was developed.
Right.
But there's sex. I think I've told you about this. There's sex toys that hook into a Wiimote.
Oh yeah.
And it transmits over a wireless connection via Skype or whatever, and
Yep.
you can control the other person's sex toy.
Yep.
You know, so that was a couple of years ago. So let's not pretend that something I said was, you know, innovatively disgusting, because now we're a disgusting race. It just happens. Yeah, no.
This is true.
So potentially life-threatening sex aids aside, are we missing any applications? I mean, you know, think about like Blu-ray technology and stuff like that. You know, with this kind of control over light and energy and frequency, don't you think that would probably revolutionize the way we access media?
Possibly. I don't know.
Because if we look at the basic technology of like reflective media, like
Yeah.
Blu-ray or whatever, think of like a Blu-ray disc that's a little bit thicker, like say like triple or quadruple layer, okay?
Mhm.
And then make it the size of say a laser disc. And you put it inside of, you know, about the same size as a Blu-ray player now. And it is essentially a very, very large, ridiculously, powerful Blu-ray disc, a hard drive, like kind of thing. But because of the nature of the technology, it's a lot clearer, you know. Like you'd have to say, all right, here's what I want on this, and that would be all that would be in there, you know. Could it be rewritable? Sure, it probably could be, but I think initially it would be, here's what I want, and you'd order, like, here's all the movies that I want on it, and so forth. And you'd have, like, you know, hundreds of movies on it at high def, accessible, right like that. Yeah, I think that'd be great. You know, if you could legally do that, where you purchase all these movies and you say, here's what's in my collection, I want to convert them for this amount of money, and then you just have this one device that's all your movies and shit. And it could be done. You know, if we're talking about something that we can focus that finely in that many different frequencies. And duh.
And stuff.
This is a good point to say a bye-bye.
Yeah.
Well, we've gone everywhere from what lightsabers were in the Star Wars verse, what they'd be here, from weapons to dildos, to media players, and everything in between. But of everything we talked about, I still want my fucking cold light bread knife. That's what I want. Well, guys, that was the first episode of All Things Meta, and we thank you for tuning in. Hope you'll listen a lot more and let us expand your mind. For thatrule.com, I am Jimmy TR.
I'm Alanah C's.
And I'm Samantha, maybe.
Cold light bread knife for the win. There you go.
You never know.
You don't know meta. You don't know meta.
You don't know how
You don't know meta.